platforms. Matt, over to you. And the question, what is your innovation when it comes to this field, and indeed what difference has it made?
Thank you very much. So we think a lot about this problem, and the innovation that we're approaching, and we'll talk about today, is thinking more about a kind of common platform or more of a collective approach to the decisions publishers make when they're putting their content out into the world, rather than all of us kind of in our own individual way building our unique site, and in that respect fragmenting and kind of losing market power in that approach. So we're going to talk about market power, how we can get some of that market power back as publishers collectively, and what that might look like. Okay, so off we go. The talk sounds a little bit like I'm defending my PhD, so I'll try to make it a little more interesting than talking about technology as a strategic advantage. But just to start off very quickly, I think a couple minutes on Say, just so you have some context on where we come from. The company's about 12 years old. We actually brought two companies together, 6 apart, you may have heard of. We created Movable Type, which was really the first professional publishing platform that was available to people, that was open source and people could start to kind of manipulate themselves. And then TypePad became a hosted version of that, and LiveJournal, you are probably familiar with many of these. We also, on the video egg side of Say's evolution, did a lot of work around the way that brands connected with consumers online. You see this overlay, bottom third on YouTube all over the place now. That's actually something that we pioneered almost 9 years ago now, and was a way for people to kind of interact and sample with branded content as you went through. That evolved into a richer display format that was creating microsites distributed across the places people were hanging out. So we've spent a lot of time not just on the publishing side, but on the monetization side of what these platforms or kind of common media challenges need to look like today. And that has all led us to Tempest, which is our publishing platform that we make available to publishers today. And just to take you through that quickly, our focus is thinking about how does a modern publishing business do 3 things. Create beautiful content that people want to spend time with, get that in front of people by growing audience and building more loyal fans for your brand, and then ultimately make enough money that you can continue to do that and build a business around the content brand that you're developing. So those are the 3 pillars that we think about as we think about all the technology decisions that you have to bring together in a platform to really solve for that. At its core, we start with a kind of configurable tool set that allows publishers to build the site that they want to express to their own consumers in a way that really brings their brand to life, but is configuring components rather than giving custom development to control to the site itself. We think this is an incredibly important point in how you think about the future of content and where that goes. What that looks like, just to give you a couple of examples very quickly, so Pacific Standard here, desktop and mobile, and then another site of ours, Ultralinks, very different, very kind of high impact, much more focused on individual feature articles. So it's the exact same platform, it's just being customized and configured in ways that really bring each brand to life. We're doing similar things on the article. So the article turns out to be where everyone spends their time. That's the thing that we are pushing into all of these different syndication channels, like Instant Article or Twitter Moments. We really need to think about how to optimize that, create content that's beautiful but can be pushed into any device. This is some of the work we're doing on our next generation of the article page, where we're learning a lot about how to get things like recommended content into the content well in more effective ways, richer imagery, auto ad injection, doing things like more native formats, pulling data as editors talk about products, and doing richer affiliate links. So there's lots of things that you can do to kind of drive deeper consumer engagement. And then on the editorial side, we think that getting editors to a place where they're focused on just creating the content itself and not so much editing CSS or HTML, but doing things like expressing that you want a breakout image, or you want a full bleed image, or you want something that's going to wrap right or wrap left. Those are the level of expression as we're crafting these articles that we think is important. And this is fundamentally because, we're going to talk about this more, but moving from a piece of HTML that you created that is the article you're posting, and that's what's in your CMS, to describing how you want the content to show up, and then being able to push that flexibly into every channel that emerges, gives us an ability to be faster as these distribution channels pop up. But as importantly, if we're doing that at scale, we can gain market power negotiating with folks like Facebook and Twitter. This is just a collection of some of the sites that are on the platform, but we're starting to see at scale that this is really working and is an approach that we're excited about. So the talk was technology is a strategic resource in a world with increasingly consolidated distribution. Maybe another way to frame that is why we're screwed and what we can do about it. But there's no question that the audience consolidating into all of these distribution platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat, and what that means in terms of content creators that need to make a living creating amazing content, that is a challenge that is well in hand, and we are, I think, only entering the next 3 to 5 years. It's only going to get worse. So just some things in the background that set this up. One of the things that is really important, I think, to understand about what's happening today in the open web or kind of like open publishing is that we're seeing declining media value. And a big piece of that is that we are kind of overloading the experience with a lot of things that compete for people's attention. This is a website that you can find out there that's just loading banner ads. It's sort of the extreme example, but the average click-through rate in banner ads today is about 0.06%. So incredibly ineffective to be placing messages adjacent to content in kind of static banner type environments. And there's some really important reasons for that we'll talk about, but that's a problem that's broken and is actually creating a vicious cycle. The second big thing that has been a huge factor for the industry over the last 2 or 3 years is this viewability issue. So because we saw such low effectiveness, we added more display units. What that ultimately did was drove a lot of volume that's driven down the price of the CPM. And now as the industry is forcing us to look at viewability, which is absolutely the right thing to be doing, you have this issue where both Google and Comscore come out with about the same numbers. 46% of display ads across the industry are actually seen in the browser long enough to be noticed. And this hasn't changed in 2 years. So as much as we've been talking about this issue as an industry, from 2013 to 2015, the measure has literally pegged at 46%, which means that we're not making progress on how do you actually improve the viewability. That's not necessarily the thing that we need to be doing. I would argue that what that's saying is that the amount of attention has stayed relatively static across desktop content consumption in the open web through that period of time. And so just putting more ads at the bottom of the page isn't the issue. The core issue here is that we need to figure out how to create more value around the attention that we're capturing as content creators. And then mobile is obviously a massive trend that's changing our industry. So if your business isn't north of 50% mobile consumption right now, it certainly is headed that direction. And we think inside of 2 years, you're going to be at 60 or 70% mobile consumption, which means that you fundamentally have to rethink how you're delivering content and how you're making money against that content. That's an incredibly important theme that's changing the value of the media that we're creating. And so that's creating revenue pressure. And what that revenue pressure is leading to is that we are looking at all kinds of other channels that we're slapping onto the page as we try to improve the value of a session. And so we're doing things like content recommendations from Taboola and Outbrain, creating overlay units at the bottom of the page. This is a mobile overlay. You're doing modals that are popping up pre-stitial as you're starting a session. Doing something similar to that, which creates an overlay on top of the content that just hovers. And then maybe the most interesting trend recently is starting to co-opt the publishing feed itself to create what is effectively display advertising that's kind of recommending additional content that people could create as we move toward more of a content marketing trend. What's notable about this and what I'd call your attention to is that everything that I showed you is different. We're taking kind of a spaghetti approach to all the different ways that we might create more value. And the adoption of that is incredibly dispersed. So it doesn't really speak to something that is a kind of concerted, unified effort to solve this problem. It's lots of different fragmented solutions that are, in aggregate, we would argue creating what's ultimately leading to a worse reader experience because there isn't any kind of cohesive or thoughtful approach to how all of these things get integrated. And what you end up with is every site is different. Every site has different of these solutions involved, and readers don't really know what to expect as they're moving through that. I think it's worth just showing kind of where that ends up. These are just two examples of sites that, these are just screenshots that we took in the last week. We've gone too far, and we're just integrating too much into the experience. And it's no wonder that when you look at where these sites end up, people are reacting very negatively. We've lost that beautiful appeal of the curated and crafted magazine that lays out content in gorgeous ways. The photography is really wonderful, and it inspires us, and it gets us thinking about kind of new ideas and fresh approach. When you take that onto the web, we've just lost something as we've made that work. There's another big piece of this that's incredibly important when you look at what's going on and why consumers are reacting the way they are, and that is just the weight or what's going on when we actually load a page. This is just a set of different sites where you break out the amount of time it takes to load the content itself, and then the amount of time it takes to load all of the advertising and monitoring that's going on alongside this. This is an incredibly significant problem that I think we talk about in maybe the wrong way as an industry today. When you have 5 or 6 ads on a page, and every agency has a different set of standards for what they want to use to measure viewability or measure audience verification or whatever that is, what you're ending up with is a load on the page that we don't even necessarily understand because we don't know which vendors various advertisers are selecting as they actually put the ad on the page. And so what you see here is that the cost to the user as we deliver content, we're not delivering just beautiful content anymore. As much as 70–80% of the cost of actually getting that content on the page is all the other stuff that goes with it. And there are no rules today about limiting or constraining what those advertisers can place on the page, which when you start to create multiple ad sizes and multiple ad formats on that page, just creates this very complex set of interactions that is what's leading to long page time. Biography is a site on our platform. We look at this a lot, just measuring the impact of additional kind of third-party services that are being run through ad requests. There's about 5 ads on a page on any given biography site. And when we look at that, we see an average of almost 800 different HTTP requests between all the various vendors. And you have a list of them here that we're tracking. But there's an even bigger issue here that we don't talk about, which is that on a modern laptop, so on a MacBook Pro that you could buy today, the utilization of your processor is at 60% because of the viewability trackers. So when we think about just the frame rate of moving through content in a way that feels beautiful and is an experience that's delightful to the user, or moving to the next page in a way that actually feels responsive and quick, like Facebook Instant Article is pulling off, we are incapable of doing that because of all of the various trackers and monitors and additional kind of third-party services that we are tacking onto our advertising solution as an industry. And this is something that we will have to solve collectively if we ever expect to create a user experience that's similar to the one that platforms can create. So all of that is just leading to declining media value. It's also leading to user backlash. This is something that's been in the news a tremendous amount over the last couple of months. It is a trend that is certainly picking up and is even getting worse as you're seeing Safari and Chrome decide to turn off Flash, and then ultimately Apple, with their new operating system, launch a way to actually turn off ads in the mobile context. I think the reason for this, on some level, has to come back to those trends that we just talked about. A kind of absolute exponential ballooning of the number of parties that are getting JavaScript onto a page as the ad industry is trying to react to viewability and audience verification trends, and ultimately what that's doing to the responsiveness or performance of sites as your processor is sucked up measuring what's on the page when. These are issues that just have to be taken on. The benefit that platforms have is that they can create a very clean, focused environment that strips out a lot of the monetization challenge today. And for that matter, a lot of the content recommendation and content marketing challenge as well. But when you think about where Flipboard has been at, or what Facebook's doing with the various experiments, this is not Instant, this is their application that they pushed out, but Instant's another great example. What Medium's done to focus just on beautiful content that strips out the advertising today, or where Instant is at. Things like what's happening with Snapchat, what's happening with Twitter Moments. All of these things are platforms where there's a tremendous amount of attention, and we need to go get that attention. But there's a reason why the consumer preference is actually to the responsiveness and experience that these platforms can offer. And that's just the amount of cruft that's hanging off the open web makes it very difficult to create a similar kind of experience to what you get in these platforms. This is AMP that was just announced. At the end, I think what we will see, what the music industry has taught us, what is I think fundamentally true is that the user will win, and they are in control, and we have to understand what it is that they need and respond to that. The platforms are helping because they're doing something that's incredibly important if you just take that backdrop, which is they're pulling out all the noise and the heaviness of where we've ended up as a fragmented content industry, and they're focusing on the content. And they're focusing on getting that content into the people that they've already captured their attention. They're on their platform. They can get that content in front of them very quickly. But it's only really a temporary help. We've seen just a huge boom over the last couple of years in the importance of Facebook to distribute your content, or Snapchat becoming a really important distribution point. You're seeing companies like Hearst have tremendous success leveraging those channels. But the question that comes with that is how we ultimately solve the monetization piece of that. And I think that's ultimately where it will get challenging, because the platforms, I think, will be more than happy to help with that. They understand the audience better than the content creators will. But there's a real challenge there in the kind of economic relationship you're going to strike with a Facebook or a Snapchat as just the power they have to throttle distribution. And so at some level, we have to get some kind of market power back in having those conversations. The problem with the open web, as we really get into it, is that it gives us too much flexibility. And so if you think about what we can do there, the first is how do we get leverage? The first question that we would pose is, how do we get leverage back as an industry in having this dialogue both with advertisers and with the distribution platforms themselves? If you just take some sites here as examples, I would again make the point that not one of these sites looks and feels similar. And so something like a 3x6 ad, or a Rising Star banner, or a 3x2 unit, or however we're thinking about monetization, doesn't take into account everything else that's on the page, where that's placed on the page, what else is competing for the user's attention. There's an ecosystem problem that we have in trying to just get to an ad format standard and then allowing any publisher to put that anywhere that they want, that is creating a huge amount of fragmentation in this kind of the ultimate solution that's available. So I would argue that on two sides, both advertisers are reacting to that the only way they can, which is paying less for lower value because they're driving a negative feedback cycle. And the second is that on the distribution side with Facebook and Twitter, they really have tremendous power in this conversation, because you're seeing them pick 4 or 5 launch partners as they launch new solutions. And in any one of those cases, if somebody doesn't want to work with them, there's somebody else standing behind. What's that? Okay. Sorry, I was.
No, that's with the Q&A.
Okay, got it. Just give me one more minute. So here I would say that getting to a collective approach where people, where there's kind of uniformity in how we're acting and bargaining together with these platforms, with advertisers, is really important. The last point I would make is that you need to create optionality. So as you think about CMS decisions, it's not just what is the content that you're creating today, but you have to think about how do you push it into every different channel that exists. And the point I would make here is that search was what we all talked about 8 to 10 years ago. And there was an entire industry built around search engine optimization. And yet today, that's not anywhere in the kind of lexicon in terms of how we think about future distribution channels. And so you need to think about atomic content units that can push into all of these channels. I'll just push through this very quickly. The 2 points that we would make here is creating some kind of common, and it doesn't have to be on the same technology solution, but there has to be uniformity to how we approach some of these decisions in publishing as an industry, so that we actually can get some market power back in working with advertisers and working with distribution channels. And you have to think about a content management system that is creating content that's an atomic unit that can actually carry itself and whatever monetization solution you have with it into all these channels that have emerged and will continue to emerge and we haven't even thought of yet, because that is where our audience lives, and that's where we'll have to survive. So with that, thank you, and I'll open up to questions.
Yeah, let's open it up. So, yeah, pull up a chair. So, any questions? Anybody wants to kick it off? Anybody on that side? Nobody here? Right. While people think of brilliant questions, they're coming. Let me ask you the big question, the big elephant in the room that we're sort of trying to get everybody to address: ad blocking. Mm-hmm. You said the user will always win. Mm-hmm. If the user chooses to block ads on your site,
yep.
How do you deal with it?
I think we have to think about two different kinds of users. So we have dedicated users or fans of our content that have a deep relationship with that content brand. And then you have people that are passersby that are more about brand building and creating more awareness around your content. And so I think ultimately where we end up is some kind of solution that connects the advertising and the content management system and says, for the first 2 or 3 times that a user shows up at my site, if they have an ad blocker on, fine, I'll show them the content, make sure they have a great experience, and hopefully they'll share it with a friend. The 4th time I see somebody that month, I might say to them, I'm not going to show you the content this time because this is the 4th time you've been back, and here are a couple of other ways that I might get you that content. You could subscribe, you could turn your ad blocker off, you could opt into a 30-second video ad, and then I'll give you another 10 seconds. So I think that there's a number of things that you could do there to create a very porous wall, if you will, that respects that users want to sample and they want to explore and they want to find new brands, but people with deep relationship need to, I think consumers understand
How easy is it to set this up? Because you're talking about a meter model. These seem like massive investments, no? I mean,
they are, and I think back to that point of creating more standardization across the industry so that there's a common expectation from the user. I think it would be good to see more kind of uniformity in how you approach something like that. They're buildable, but they are complex.
Right. The first publisher out of the gate on this, as you know, is Axel Springer in Germany.
Absolutely.
And they sort of shocked the industry a little bit this week by announcing that there will be, as we heard earlier here, blocking the blockers.
Yep.
And only subscribers, even if you're a subscriber, you'll be charged a premium. So you have to pay on top of it if you want to have, even as a subscriber, a digital experience without ads. What do you think of that?
I think
it's
that
bold, do you?
I think it's bold. I think it's very aggressive. I think that there's lots of markets where you will have to find a more kind of medium solution. So I think that a hard and fast wall, history says that probably isn't going to work.
Yeah. Anybody else? A question here. Brilliant question. Sorry, for those of you who couldn't hear, is this the beginning of the end of the free web as the platforms take over and they become the distribution channels?
So I think it's a great question. I think that what I don't think it has to be the end of the independent web. I think that we need to move away from this place where everything is a unique snowflake. And so the independent web has taken itself to the extreme that everyone thinks that they know best about how to design their particular site. And so we end up with tremendous fragmentation which means that no one has any leverage or bargaining power. I think what we need to see are standards that we come together as an industry and say this is what's important, and that's, I think, the only way the independent web has a chance to survive.
Who does that? Because there's been so many years of people talk about common purpose. Who should lead this? The IAB, FIPP?
I think it should be FIPP, MPA. I think IAB is maybe an organization
governments?
that could, but
governments? I mean, should FIPP and publishers lobby governments to? I don't know.
It's a good question. I think you'd also take an open source approach of Drupal and WordPress and others coming together to create a working group. But at some level, we need some commonality, or the independent web will die.
Big words. Anybody over there? Quickly, is Flash dead?
Yes.
Okay. And
is that fast enough?
In terms of next steps, I mean, because I am fascinated by how frictionless Facebook and Twitter, Snapchat is so simple, but it's unbelievable how, I mean, for instance, it's just this morning looking at The Guardian and how long it takes for the ads to load up, and how frictionless Facebook and Twitter is. So what is it that they're doing, in addition to having billions of dollars in developers? I mean, how do they approach the display of their content and the ads that is just so perfect, so frictionless?
What they do is they pre-cache. So
what does that mean?
When you have connection to Wi-Fi, they're loading up all the content they think you're going to want to watch, so that when you actually get to it, it's there. Whereas in the open, whereas in the open web, we request something when we click the link, and that's when the process starts. And so that's a fundamental advantage that mobile apps have to the rest of the web.
Yeah. Another question from Matt Sanchez, first class mind here with you. Very interesting insights. Nobody? Right. We'll leave it there. Matt, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.